Hey Defenders, welcome back. In this video, I want to do things a little bit different. So I want to use Metasploit to actually get a reverse shell on a vulnerable host, and then after that, see how we can use Wazuh to create rules, to dump out processes, and to ultimately detect when someone has used Metasploit to generate a reverse shell. So stick around and we'll jump into it. And all right, so on the right side here within my GitHub, which I'll also link in the description, I've created a demo repo for you guys. And under that, well, there's only one file right now, but I have this file called detect Metasploit attacks. So if you guys open that up, you'll be able to follow along with me, and you can just copy and paste, and makes it a lot easier for you guys, so you're not having to pause the videos and etc. So there's a few key pieces that we have to make this demo possible. First is the Typhoon VM, which is just, I referenced it in the last video, which is a vulnerable server that you can download and stand up. Don't make it publicly accessible, so a little bit of caution with that. Make sure it's only within an internal lab network, because this thing can be compromised very easily. Just fair warning with that. But it's just a VM, and if you go to their website here, I've linked it here as well, you can just download the OVA file and install that into VMware, VirtualBox, whatever VM hypervisor solution you're using. And it's pretty easy. It is kind of a challenge box, so you're supposed to do some enumeration to get the username and password, but I've just made it easier for you guys and have provided that for you. There's a ton of demos online if you're looking for more in-depth, which is out of the scope for this video in terms of actually getting the username and password. And then you can once you've logged on as the Typhoon user, you can run a su /admin, and then provide the password is also Metallica. So, and then you can escalate to root via sudo bin bash, and then the password is also Metallica again for that. So because ultimately once the second half of this demo will be to detect this type of attack via Wazuh, we need a Wazuh agent on this guy, and you need root privileges on the Typhoon box to do so. So enough talking though, let's actually jump into it. So again, I have the Typhoon box, which is our vulnerable box, and then I have Kali Linux on the left side of the screen here, and here's a URL to download an ISO or OVA or VMDK for you guys to install yourselves. So if you don't already have Kali, highly recommend it. It comes pre-bundled with a lot of tools that are useful for penetration testing and labs like what you'll see here. So let's go ahead and jump into it. Let me go ahead and exit out of the Metasploit. I just had this loaded for the intro because I don't know, it looks kind of cool with the rabbit. Let me exit out of that. Okay, so I'm root on the Kali box, and I'm gonna cheat. I should run like an nmap of my whole internal LAN, but I'm gonna save the time and just run a if config on the Typhoon box to get the IP address of this guy, so I know which guy to scan. So I'm just going to run an nmap tool. If you don't know what nmap is, it's just a port scanner it's pretty popular, and there's also a ton of videos on YouTube and blogs and stuff about how to use it. So I won't go into depth about that, but we're using this tool to run a port scan on our Typhoon box. So nmap -s capital V, and then we'll provide the IP address. So now the Kali Linux box is sending out network packets to see what ports on the Typhoon box are set to be listening. So if we run like a netstat here, you'll see a ton of services are listening. And to speed things up, we're not running a scan against every single port that a machine has. If it was like 65,000 something, we're not doing that. We're just scanning against the most common port. So right off the bat, we see that it's listening for HTTP connection. So let's go ahead and navigate to this guy within our browser. So if I just grab this guy and run HTTP, and I'll throw in my IP address here, and we see that Typhoon is presenting this like basic web page, which is cool, I guess. But let's use this other tool, derb, to then see what subdirectories are behind this guy, right? So it's pretty obvious. We also got the service enumeration, so we know it's running Apache. Apache has the ability to, serve as a reverse proxy in front of various applications, right? So we see this generic page here, but now let's see, what all applications are running on this guy, and what applications will Apache pass us off to, right? And to do that, I like to use this derb command. So I'll do derb and then space HTTP, and then again I'll just give the IP address of this guy, and then just end it with a slash. And right off the bat, we can see a ton of directories starting to be loaded, right? So we see assets, calendar, CGI bin. That's a good one. Drupal. I know Drupal is heavily exploitable, so we'll focus on this one. You see some PHP myadmin. So it's a good little tool, and I'll go ahead and exit out of this so we don't keep the system busy. But it's also using comment. You see it loads a word list. So these are just common applications that people stand up behind Apache. So you can see like PHP myadmin, for example. So if we copy and go into this guy, we'll get the PHP admin page. But for this example, I want to focus on the Drupal. So if we go to Drupal, we see welcome to Typhoon VM. Okay, that's cool. If we go ahead and inspect and look at the HTML of this guy, let's see, let's make it a little cleaner, bring it out a little wider so we can read it. We will see, if we drop this guy down, we see Drupal 8. So let's do a quick, so we immediately get the version of Drupal that's running, and there already seems to be a ton of vulnerabilities related to Drupal 8. But we can also use another tool that comes pre-bundled with Kali, and what is a huge feature of Kali is Metasploit. So we can go ahead and run an MSF console to load Metasploit, and the Metasploit framework is basically a bunch of they have like these crazy message of the days that they'll throw up. So you can, if you're following along, yours will probably be different. It just generates randomly, so you can disregard that stuff. But you can see I'm running Metasploit 6, and is basically a framework that has a ton of exploits and payloads already pre-bundled. It's kind of like a Google for exploits, I guess. So I'm loaded into the MSF console, and let's do, so we know Drupal is the application we want to attack, right? So let's go ahead and search, let's run a search for Drupal. And upon running that, we already see, let me run it again so it's a little more clear. We already see 8 exploits that relate to the Drupal application. If we did we also saw PHP admin, right? Wasn't that one? Maybe it's PHP myadmin. Yeah, PHP myadmin. I'm sure that's another popular one. I'm sure there's a ton for that as well. And yeah, it looks like they are. So what's cool about the search capabilities, you can do like, I can even maybe search for Apache, and wow, there's a ton for Apache, right? It's kind of cool. And you can use the kind of like a search engine to see, okay, I'm going to target an Apache server, or I'm going to target a server that's running Drupal. What exploits do I already have available for me that I can really just kind of point and click and see what sticks, right? So it's pretty cool. But again, we're gonna stick with Drupal. And so we have a few exploits that we could run that target various attacks, right? So there's a SQL injection, there's an API property injection, some unserializer injections, PHP code executions, but we're gonna focus on this guy here. And I also have that in my GitHub. Probably need to take the time to make these a lot more appealing. Probably just sticking them in GitHub repos isn't the best, so maybe I should look to do some blog things. But if you guys have any blog services or recommendations that you guys like, let me know in the comments and I'll check those out as well. I'm sure there's a better way that I can include screenshots and stuff that I'm just not doing within here. But enough of that. I will run the use command. So the use command here just specifies what exploit we're going to use. And I'm just going to specify this guy here. So you can disregard the no payload configured. That's fine. We see the exploit, and then we also see the name that we're using, right? So that's correct. Now, real quickly, let's do a show options. And here we can see all of the kind of like, well, options that we can set during this, right? So we'll need to make a few tweaks here. You see our L host, which is the host of the Kali Linux box, right? And then the port that will listen for a reverse shell back on. Right, and then we need to specify the R host, which will be the remote host, in our case, the Typhoon box, and then we'll also need to change the target URI. Right, so show options gives us that. I will set the R host. That'll be the IP address of my Drupal box. So 192.168.1.104. All right, and we can confirm that our host is set. Again, we can run a show options, and that value will now be within the our host setting there. We can set. And now, now we need to specify the actual path, right? So if we didn't have this set, Metasploit would just try to run against this page. Well, this page, it looks to be just basic HTML. Oh, there are some buttons that maybe link to some other places, if they're actually real or not. Yeah, it looks like they are, and it just brings you back to the Prisma. I guess maybe these are the people behind Typhoon. Free shout out for these guys, I guess, cybersecurity consultants. So we're not concerned about this page, right? But if we were to leave the target URI just at slash, Metasploit would try to attack just slash, right? So actually I can demonstrate that for you guys. So I won't set the target URI, and I'll just say exploit. So here we can see that due to failure, cannot reliably check exploit complete but no session was created. So Metasploit just tried to hit the basic page that's loaded on port 80, right? No application is standing behind this. So what we need to target is the slash Drupal, right? Because that's where the Drupal application is residing behind. So I will set our target URI to include that, and I can do that just with this command here. So set target URI Drupal. All right, and I'll go ahead and say show options. So we have our R host set, our port, right? Because again, we're just going over HTTP, which uses port 80. We're not doing any SSL. And we have our target URI now set to Drupal, right? And as you can see, they say in the description, path to the Drupal install. On who set up the Drupal application, right? Like, so when we dumped all of the directories here, right? This could be like 1/2/3/Drupal, and that's where the application reside. And if that was the case, then we would just do that same thing here, right? We would do /1/2/3/Drupal. So we're telling Metasploit where the Drupal application is running. So now that all looks good, and let's go ahead and do exploit. And here we can see Metasploit is reaching out. It sees that the target is vulnerable. So let's give it a few minutes. And all this is bundled with Metasploit, right? So like, how easy is that? Where all the exploit and the payloads is being done for us under the hood. We set a few options and run exploit, right? And it's pretty easy. Maybe scary how easy it is. But now we see our session has been opened. So great. So we have used Metasploit to exploit this Drupal application. Now let's go ahead and get a shell on this guy. All right, so now we see that is created, and let me run this Python import command so I can actually interact and get a terminal on the Typhoon box, right? So now you can see I'm the www-data user on the Typhoon box, right? So see, can I run an if config? I can, and here we see the IP address of Typhoon, right? So I now have a reverse shell on my Kali Linux box of this guy. So I'm on the Typhoon box right now. If I run a who am I, we see I'm this user www/data. So now looking back on the Typhoon box, right? So if we dump the processes, right, we'll see something pretty interesting. So I'll dump the PS, just will list out your processes, and I'm gonna grep for the user www-data, right, because that's who I am. So, and we'll probably see some interesting results. Yeah, and right off the bat, we see some base 64 decoding, right? So that's not normal. And this output here is pretty apparent to a reverse shell, right? And as you can see, well, that is indeed the case. So how can we use Wazuh to detect this, right? So there's a few steps we need to do. And I will throw this off to the side for now. And let me bring this guy over to the side. All right, so I already have the Wazuh agent installed on my Typhoon box, like as you see here. So we're not having to worry about that. But we do need to configure a few rules and then also make some setting tweaks, right, on the manager and on the agent itself. So, and we'll do that within these blocks here. So there's a few ways we could go about this, right? So on the Typhoon box, we see when we ran a PS, right, and grep for the www user, we got this output of some base 64, right? And that's pretty apparent that, yes, that's a reverse shell. So what's great about the Wazuh, and is a great feature to add, is we can actually run remote commands on the agents, right? So I can have the Wazuh manager run a PS command like what we have here to dump all processes that are running on an agent, right? And I can run that on a set interval. So I can, but because this isn't like something that's being written to a log file, right? This is a command that I'm running to then dump out to my T2I session that I have here, right? And that you can see on screen. This isn't being outputted to a log file or a JSON file or any type of file, right? This is actually a physical command. If I wanted to, I could also do the same for if config, right? So if I wanted to have the Wazuh manager run a remote command on my agents and then gather the output and send it back to me, we can do that. And it's a great feature to enable. So we can go into our UI here. I'll go into management. I will go into groups. So you can group your agents into groups, and within these groups you can set various settings. I won't get into grouping really in this video because there's a lot of ways you can go about it. You could group, all your Linux servers into one group, all your Windows servers into another, and maybe you're having different file integrity monitoring processes going on for that. So yeah, you can get really creative with it and get really organized, which is a nice feature to have. And so what we can also do is these groups will have files. So as you can see, I'm editing the agent.conf of this default group. And so what this allows me to do is make changes universally to all agents within this group, right? So say in my default group, I had, 1,000 agents. Well, I don't want to individually have to log on to every one of those servers to make an addition to the osec.conf file of theirs, right? So what I can do is edit the agent.conf of a specific group, and upon doing so, this will get pushed out to all of the agents within that group. So it's a huge time saver. It's really nice. You do want to make sure your agent config tags are here. By default, they are here. So make sure that is correct, or else they'll complain about the syntax. And what we'll do is we'll just copy this wodle, this command wodle in there. And so I'll copy, paste that in. And let's go ahead and walk through it, right? Disabled is no, so it's not disabled. You can add tags if you want, just to be a little more descriptive. And so I'm doing that here, just ps-list. So I know exactly what this command, is doing. And then within our command block, here's the meaty stuff, right? So as you can see, I have inputted the command that we ran previously, right, to dump out the processes on the Typhoon box, right? Notice I'm not doing the grep because I'm actually going to dump all commands, right? This grep here was looking for the specific user that I currently was, which was www-data, right? And now this command will dump the user, the process ID, and as well as the command, right? So if we correlate that to here, we see, so we have user, which refers to www-data. We have then process ID, which refers to this number here. And then we have the command, right, which applies to this here. So you can see some of my other commands, right? And so this command will now remotely be ran on our agents. So if I copy and then I can paste that here and run it, and it'll dump all processes that are running. So it'll be a lot more than just the www user. We'll see the root user and all that as well. So you can see postfix, root. So now we're dumping all processes that are running on this box, right? So pretty cool. And again, we see our shell still open, right? Because I actually haven't exited out of it or anything. So it's still open. And then we'll set the interval time for every time we want this command to run. So in this demo, I have it set to every 10 seconds. Depending on the command you're looking to do, you would change the interval time appropriately. So if I wanted to do like an if config or like a netstat -ltpnd to list ports that are listening, right? So I could do something like that. It's really cool and really flexible because really any command you can run on a command line within a console, you can do here, which is really awesome. Ignore output, set that to no. We'll set ignore output to no because we want to see the output of the command, right? Run on start is set to yes. So if the agent were to restart the Wazuh agent service for whatever reason, this would run again. And then timeout is set to 5. And this is a value of seconds. So, and this is just if this command takes more than 5 seconds to run, it'll time it out and kill it. So you have a little bit of a safety net, right? If you run, maybe if you try to run a command that you're trying to like list the whole file system or something and it starts to hog up, that may take a while and would hog up CPU. And so you can set a timeout for that so you don't have a command go rogue on you, right? And then start to hijack all of the resources for your server. All right, and so we have that, so we'll go ahead and save that. And what's cool is upon saving this, the Wazuh manager will now push this block to our Wazuh agent, right? So in this demo, we only have one agent, but in a actual, like production environment, you could potentially have hundreds or thousands of servers, and this would push them out to all of them for you, which is really nice. But now we need to create a rule that says, hey, we see a reverse shell and alert us on that, because now all we've enabled is to run the command, right? So that's all we're doing. Right now it wouldn't do any warnings. So now we need to get alerted upon malicious processes that are running. So I'll go into rules, I'll go into custom rules and select manage rule files. And let's go ahead and edit. And I will go ahead and grab these two blocks here. I'll go ahead and blow away their example that they have, because I don't care about that, and paste that in. So let's walk through this as well. So again, you can call the group name whatever you want. Rule ID, by default, it starts at 100,001 is where they encourage you to, is the ID number that they encourage you to start at, because Wazuh also creates rules that they release with their Wazuh managers by default, and you would risk your rules being overwritten upon an update to a new version. So they encourage you to start at a higher number, preferably 100,001, and then you can increment up from there. And so this first one is we're specifying the location, and the location will relate to what we had within our command wodle here, right? So you notice we're including the command, so including this value here, and then an underscore, and then we're including the tag, right? So ps-list. So again, if you want to name it differently, you just need to make sure you need to follow the same naming convention. But ultimately, the tag can be whatever string you want it to be. And then description. This is just a description to us, just list of running processes, and then we're also. And then I'm also adding it to another group, process monitor. So the rule group will be process monitor as well as commands. You can have multiple groups per rule. So I'm doing that there. So this is like a example of a parent and child rule, right? So we first have to tell Wazuh, hey, I want you to evaluate the commands that are being ran remotely, right? And so we're using this location block to do that. And now we're using this child rule here to look at this output and say, okay, does it match what looks to be a reverse shell? Which again, if we go back into our process dump, right, we see eval base 64 decode. Right? And so we see that value here for all of our reverse shell processes. So what we can do, what we're doing is then matching off of that. So if we see that string anywhere within this process dump, right? It could be at the beginning, it could be at the end, it could be in the middle, wherever. We will then trigger this alert and say, hey, reverse shell detected, right? And then we're assigning it to group, process monitor, and as well as attacks. So again, this level is set to 10, and this one's actually set to a 0. So we'll never see the output of this rule, so it won't be logged. But this rule is always triggering, but we won't see it being triggered on our end because it's set to a level 0. If you wanted to see the output of this all the time, you could set it to a value, I think by default, 3 or above is what's logged. And so that allows us to create these parent rules, but we don't necessarily want to log them and take up disk space on our Elasticsearch servers, right? So we can specify that, hey, we don't want Wazuh to log it, but we want this to fire, or we want Wazuh to evaluate this rule because it matters for this rule, right? And so that's what we're doing there. So we have that set to 0, and then this is set to 10. So this will actually log an alert whenever it's triggered. So we'll go ahead and save that and restart. And this, again, this is restarting the manager. And if I go back into here, so we've done that, and now this last piece is just the Wazuh agent portion. So what makes this possible is the ability to run remote commands, right? Well, that's actually an option that we have to manually set within the Wazuh agent. It doesn't come by default, which is definitely probably for the best. You know, so when we set this value to 1 and restart, the Wazuh agent will say, okay, I will accept remote commands from the Wazuh manager. Right now, this value is set to 0. So even though this command is now trying to be ran on the agent, the agent is disregarding it because its value is set to 1. Sorry, it's set to 0, right? And that's just for safety. Again, these commands can be whatever you want. So I could run like a reboot command, right? And and really cause serious production issues if I were to do that, right? So with great power comes great responsibility, right? You do have the freedom to run any command you want. So just be careful, and I would highly advise kind of slowly rolling it out into like a dev or staging environment before you make it to production. But let's go ahead and put that guy in. All right, and now let's run a restart. So service-wazuh agent restart, and now it's taking this value, the wazuh underscore command dot remote commands equal to 1, and is now honoring that value, right? And so now the Wazuh agent will accept remote commands. So now let's go ahead and replicate our attack, and let's see what we get. So it's actually probably being triggered as we speak because the session is still open. But let me go ahead and exit out of all this, and we'll do it live. Quit. Exit. All right, now we're out of Metasploit. Let me see if it's still running. Oh. It's not. All right, cool. So now I'll run msf console. And I'll come back up to here to grab the exploit again. So we'll grab this guy. We'll set our R host to the 192.168.1.104, I think. Yep, 104. Set our target URI. And now let's go ahead and exploit. All right, so it got us a session open, and let's wait for a sec and we'll get a shell. All right, let me now interact with it. All right, and now if we run this, we'll see. So again, we see the process dump, and we see the val base 64 decode. So evidence of a reverse shell. Now let's pop into Wazuh, and this should be lighting off some alerts. So I'll go into modules, go into security events. I'll go to the events tab. And yeah, so already look at, since this is set to run every 10 seconds, right? So we're getting a flood of these alerts. And sure enough, we see our rule firing, reverse shell detected. Right? And then we get the host name. If we open this guy up, we now see the full output of that command being ran, right? So again, we see the user who ran the command, we see the process ID, and then we see the full command here, right? So pretty cool. We can now monitor processes that are running to detect a reverse shell that was spun up by Metasploit. Right, so pretty cool. So, and then now we can, of course, set up email alerting, which I demoed in a previous video. So you guys check that out. So you can be alerted within real time. So yeah, pretty powerful stuff that I would highly recommend kind of tinkering with and seeing how you could roll it out in your own environments. So I think that'll wrap it up for this video. If you haven't already, please subscribe. It helps me out a lot, as well as like and comment. And thanks for hanging out with me, and I will see you guys in the next one.